years ago, I had made a mold and cast up these knobs for my combination coupe. And I looked and looked and didn't have the mold. It doesn't surprise me because it'd be 20 years old, wouldn't be good anyway. Here we have a mold being done because this particular sedan we're doing does not have a set of knobs for it, nor would they match. So we're making a new mold. You notice we've done this from the side so we can get all the detail, etc. It is an RTV mold. This is a special clay that has no sulfur in it in case we got anything near the RTV because it won't harden. So this is a 2-pour to get this far. Yeah, 2 times because I poured it up part way, de-aired it. That brought up the silicone around the edges. Now we've poured it to we're exactly halfway up this knob, and it's going to sit 24 hours. And we'll remove our 2 plastic pieces here, which are serving as our guide pins. They're going to put the mold together, and we will build up around here and pour the other half. Eventually, this will be the sprue to fill in the part. So it's very large, which will work out really good, and we'll cut it off right there. The car is going to need 4 of these. This is one of those things that many people may not have. We'll have them on the website from now on. So this will be going into the 39 4-door sedan for Kenny and Julie. People often don't realize when you're restoring a car, particularly something as esoteric as a gram, that you run into some interesting issues you have to take care of. Here's the original handle, which I made the knob for. You've already seen that. But this is a totally original handle. This has not been restored. And it's in such good shape, you know, it's got little flaws, but not much, that I'm going to use that as is, because it is original to the car. Now on the back here, you see when I made this one, I filled everything in, but you notice there's a countersink. And that countersink would have originally had a rivet in it. Well, I've got a screw in it. Well, why would I use a screw? Because a screw is threaded. I could thread it into this part and then glue it on with some JB weld. So as a consequence, it's well held, it's usable. You can crank your window with this instead of using a rivet like they would have originally. However, looking at the reproduction handle, which is very beautiful. It's a beautiful reproduction. No problem with that except no countersink. So I'm going to have to very carefully countersink this in the back so that we have a place to attach our new knobs, which will be more accurate than even this knob was. I mean, this visually looks okay, but the other one is going to have the inside back even more correct. And you say, well, why does that matter? Well, since I've got one that good, I'm going to do it that way. Have as correct as it could possibly be. But that will have to be countersunk. I'm still going to use a screw, probably a Phillips and not a flat blade, because the screw will in fact allow me to attach the knob so it will work permanently for Kenny and Julie on their car. But this is one of those things you run into when you're restoring a car that you weren't figuring on, because even though the handle's beautiful, it doesn't have its countersink. So now I'm going to have to very, very carefully hold this in my mill system with some leather on the side and drill, actually countersink that so it's the proper setup so I can in fact attach the knobs. It's something that nobody even know to look for. Kenny and Julie wouldn't even know about it, except that I just told you another thing you have to do that you weren't figuring you're going to do. last restoration blog video on this car we're doing for Kenny, some may have thought that the wheel was done, but it wasn't done because it hadn't any clear on it. And so this section had not been cleared, and the fact is the outside had not been painted airliner gray. It was still in primer. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this would have been done in the factory versus how it's done when you restore it. Back when Graham Page was building cars in the 1930s. In the later part of the 1930s, the wheels all came from Motor Wheel Company. So 1938 through 41, they all came from Motor Wheel Company. Now, Motor Wheel Company, if you've watched my videos of the Graham Page Rototeller, I talked to you about Motor Wheel Company there because that is the same company that made these wheels and made the Graham Page Rototeller wheels. That company went out of business, I believe, in the early 1960s. Nice thing though, Graham Page is more of an esoteric automaker. They were trying to be big-time automaker, but theirs is very hard on the automobile business, as well as many other businesses in the United States. When they were buying these wheels, they'd come in basically clean, ready to use. First thing that Graham Page would do is they'd have to clean them up, which is the same thing that was being done at Chrysler, because it's the same wheel Chrysler uses. So if you cannot find Graham Page wheels, you look for Chrysler wheels. They're the same. Back to what they did. They first have to clean them because, of course, they've been manufactured. They're going to look beautiful and new, except they probably got oil, etc. on them from the manufacturing process or other dirt. So they're going to clean them up, most probably with lacquer thinner wash. Get it all nice and clean real quick. And they're going to hang it on a moving conveyor. It's probably got hooks, so they can hang it here or hang it here or hang it here, but they will hang them on a moving conveyor. They'll go a little ways and there'll be a painter. And he's going to spray it with red oxide primer. That was the primer Graham was using at the time. It was ubiquitous pretty much in the auto industry because they were using lacquer-based paints, and red oxide primer was the primer that most everybody would be shooting. So they'd shoot red oxide primer on it completely all over. And then it runs through a drying tunnel or oven, comes out the other side. It's all set to be painted with its finish color. Now, most of the wheels Graham was doing were one color. They were, for example, like on my four-door sedan, which is in Meadowbrook green, the wheels were Meadowbrook green. So a painter could paint the entire wheel all at once, goes back into another drying oven, comes out the other side. You've got a wheel that's all set for the striper. Now they're going to pick it off that conveyor. They're going to set it on some sort of rotating stand so that the striper can get the circles in it. And there are 3 stripes that go in. They're done by hand. That's a very steady person, much more steady than I could ever be, so I don't stripe by hand. There are only some people that are steady enough to do it. But that would be some gentleman who was really steady would put in 3 stripes with the thing rotating. It then probably gets hung back on the hooks, run through the oven one more time, it's done. Now all of that realistically probably took under 30 minutes. And we aren't there to time it, but it didn't take very long to paint that one color wheel. Now the 2-color wheel might have taken just a few minutes longer because what would have happened is they would have done their primer, then they would come back with the airliner gray, that's this color, and then they would have done the inner color. Now of course there was the drying time in between, as I mentioned before, for the single color wheel. But when you're going to put that extra color in here, this would have been pulled off of that conveyor, set on a stand, and they would have had some sort of, most likely, metal mask that went over this and covered everything but the center of that wheel. And with that being done, and there being a backer back here, so that they wouldn't get anything going through, the painter would then spray the center color on the wheel. And he would do this because it's red, probably minimum 2 times, probably 3 times, to get enough coats on it so that it covers it. Then it gets hung back on the moving conveyor, goes through the oven, ready for its drying to be done, and now the striper takes it off and puts the stripe on it. So the 2-color wheel definitely took more time. And we do know that Kenny's car is the same airliner gray combination that is on my combination coupe. It's the same color number, so it does get the 2-color wheel. Now the other thing that's interesting here is airliner gray is a metallic. The inner red color matches up to Liberty Bus Lines Red. Yes, that's what you actually asked for. Liberty Bus Lines Red is what it matches to. Except it looks awful dead all by itself. So it is a very small amount of pearl that I've added to the red. Just enough to make it look more appropriate next to the airliner gray. Is that original? No. But it does look significantly better, and it is so small amount of pearl that this is not looking like a metal flake. It just adds just enough flash to look nice against the airliner gray. Now, something else you should notice. I don't do anything in this area when I'm working on, nor on the back am I going to do anything to make it real nice, etc. So I don't care about dust flecks or whatever, because these spots, when we screw on the bolts, they're instantly going to get damaged. When we put on the hubcap, they're instantly going to get damaged. There's even going to be some damage that will occur in here when you snap the hubcap on it. It's just the way it happened when it was new, too. So we don't care about that. You don't see that. You put your wheel trim ring on here, and there's spots on the edge are going to get damaged. What we do care about, though, is all the field that looks nice and all the stuff you're going to see looking nice. So on the back, we're not going to care any more than Graham Page did, and nobody in the 30s did care. They were just happy they could buy a car if they had the money to do that. They weren't looking at the back of the wheel saying the back of the wheel isn't perfect. No, that wasn't important. But this part you're going to see is important. The back just has to be painted. This just has to be painted, but the part you're going to see is important. So when you're doing this as a restoration, we're not doing it as a factory. We're starting one with a wheel that we've either got to strip by using a wire brush, or we're going to sandblast it, or we're going to dip it. I don't recommend using paint remover because you get in places and it'll get in the cracks and it'll haunt you later on. But you're going to have to get it all off. Then you're going to have to wipe it down with pre-cleaner at least. Then you're going to come back and you're going to self-etch primer on it. Then you're going to start the process of filling and priming and filling and priming. Usually takes a minimum of 3, often as many as 6 to do these wheels, because nowadays they're full of pits and scratches and problems, and some of them are downright terrible. They're still got integrity, but there's a lot of work to do to get these done. And the interesting thing is, you might figure out, it's all hand sanding. You aren't going to take a power sander and go in here and do this. You have to hand sand the wheels. Then you have to do all your masking. Now when you do your back of the wheel, you mask off here, 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 and all these, so you don't get any blow through and have stuff not look good on the front of the wheel. That only takes about 15 minutes. You paint the back of the wheel, that's fine. Now when you go to the front of the wheel, though, it's a whole different story, because you're going to have to mask to do the gray. And you say, well, you could spray the red over the gray. Yeah, but if I use a lighter gray primer, which was done here, the red does not require as much to cover, and red is so incredibly expensive anymore. Incredibly expensive. That you really don't want to spray over the darker gray, because the darker gray is going to make you spend more money on red paint. So the solution is you mask off this section, paint your gray, mask off the outside section, paint your red. Each time you mask it, the only way you can do it is do it by hand, and it takes me about 45 minutes to hand mask this and 45 minutes to hand mask that, and it was 15 minutes on the back. So you got an hour and 45 minutes just in masking these, plus the time to clean them up, plus the time of priming, sanding, and filling multiple times, minimum of 3 per wheel. Some of them, the one that would be the spare on this car, that took 6. I don't remember that specifically because it was the worst one. But in order to get them good enough so that they look like they should look, you're going to spend a lot of time. And I'm going to be real honest, wheels are some of the most time-consuming things you get to do because it's all handwork. So it's not like people think. It's not fast. And in all honesty, they average out to about, by the time you're done with all that stuff and all that hand sanding and multiple primings and multiple fillings, you get about 10 hours in a wheel. So they take a long time to do. And it's probably the longest time thing you'll do. It's kind of funny, because you can do a fender skirt far faster than you can do a wheel. Because you can use power sanding and it makes all the difference in the world. The same thing with so many other things on the body. But wheels are total handwork. I know of no way to do this without doing it by hand, because if you start using a machine, you start grinding spots in or flats and stuff, and it just doesn't work. So that gives you an idea. Wheels are a lot of work. They weren't at the factory, but when they're 80 plus years old, there's a lot of work in wheels. Here we're looking at my radio on the shelf. I'm zooming in on the emblem assembly Kenny wants to have on his radio also. One of the things Kenny doesn't know, because we've never told him, is this particular ancient computer here. Yes, it's ancient. By computer standards, it's 30 years old. Definitely ancient technology. But the monitor you're seeing here, right there, and you see it picks up funny on the video camera, that monitor is a replacement. It would work with that computer. The old one totally died, and I had to look and look to find a monitor that would in fact work with that computer, because you can't use a flat screen. Without that monitor, we can't run the laser cutter. And this is an industrial level laser cutter that is also 30 years old. Here's the finished label for Kenny's radio. Now, it isn't finished in that we haven't cut it out or punched holes in it, but that's done. You saw it done on the laser. It is done as a reverse process. Originally, this would have been a screen printing system back in the day, but we do it as a reverse, where we paint the aluminum and use a laser to remove the paint from where it's not supposed to be. That gives us an exact copy of the gram label, nameplate, off the end of the radio, which was missing in this case. So here we have an exact copy. It's going to go on Kenny's radio, and this will be on the website for people who might want to buy one. Here you have the radio with the nameplate installed. Those of you who are in the know will know it's incorrect right now, because I need to get number 4 slotted screws, not Phillips. We have Kenny's radio, which at this point has got a lot of work done to it. It's been recapped in a previous video, but as you can see, this is completely refinished, including all the screws. It's not the only thing refinished. Here we have the radio head for Kenny's radio, And the things that are going to be done to it pretty much have been done to it. We're leaving a lot original because it was in real good shape, but some things we've had to redo because they weren't. But you'll see this is empty here, and it's also going to be empty on the opposite end. Sections that go in the openings on the radio. 2 boxes on the end, as I showed you. Problem is, you can see they're all warped, discolored, cracked, etc. These aren't usable. They're much better than the ones I had on my radio back in the day when I did mine, but these are definitely not good. I checked up to see, based on the stations that are listed, this is the station one, so technically I should have it this way if we were looking at the radio. This has the stations that would be pre-selects that were put in the radio when it was new. This particular radio pre-select set tells me it's from Kansas City, Missouri. Now, because a pre-select radio has a number of stations you can stick in it, the reality is a pre-select wouldn't have been sold unless somebody has a lot of stations that they have in their area. In other words, I doubt they sold a pre-select radio in Montana or Idaho back in the day, or Wyoming, for example, or even Arizona. They would have sold them in places like Kansas City, Missouri. But the pre-select radio, what goes on is we have these 2 dial setups, one for the radio stations, the other for the tone control. However, these are unusable. Now, these were originally made of plastic, and it's a very complicated thing, and the ones in my radio were completely shot. So years ago, I designed laser cut components that would build up into these assemblies so we could fix the radio. And that is what you're going to see next with it. We can use the metal components in here. That we can do, but we cannot use the rest of it because it's not going to work. It's shot. So we're going to show you how we're going to build it up out of laser components. And those items will also be available on the website should you have a pre-select radio and you want to have the insides. The same insides will work for both the Graham and the Studebaker pre-select radio. In this fast motion section of the video, I'm showing you how we are laying out the horizontal half-quarter-inch dowels. The reason we're using half-quarter-inch dowels is originally Graham used some sort of plastic-style material, making 10 half-round flutes underneath the fabric on the door. This makes for a very nice, very, I would suppose, streamlined modern design, more than it's Art Deco, in the door panel. Now originally I think it's probably a hot stamped system. Well, we don't have whatever that plastic was, and besides it doesn't hold up over the years. But here we're setting it up for you. That first line I put in and setting up the first one, that took about 10 minutes. I know I've cut all kinds of things out and made this go 16 times fast, but it took about 10 minutes because you want it absolutely perfect, because this line is going to rule the entire passenger side of the car when we're done with it. So you don't want to make a mistake. It must be square. And it is 2 feet up from the bottom of the door. That is how it is measured out. Now, interestingly, we know for a fact that this design was used because my combination coupe used this design. And we'll show you that in a little segment, that it is in fact what was used in that design of that car. Now, how do we know it was original? That car, as I said in a video years ago, had its original fabric covered up by white and red naugahyde in a 1950s custom style, but they never got rid of any of the original fabric, so we knew both the color and the exact way that Graham did it. This is the same method I used in that car to come up with putting the flutes in, and there are 10 of them, that make it look as original as you can possibly do it. Now when we look at Kenny's car here, and we're adding this in, we're not quite sure what Kenny's car had, but this is what he's requested to have put in it, considering we know this to be an original Graham design. Here we have both rear panels, that's the back seat panels, for Kenny's car, set up to this point.